In this lesson, we'll begin to build sort of a cylindrical base for our solar array. So we've got our group here. Let's go ahead and turn the visibility of this off for now. So we'll select the group, just hit Control H to turn that visibility off so we can concentrate on our piece here. So the idea with this piece is that we want it to be able to serve as kind of a hub for the legs to come off of and also for the array to attach to. So let's start with just a cylindrical shape because we're going to have 3 legs. It gives us some flexibility on being able to put the legs kind of wherever we want. So let's go ahead and create a primitive cylinder. We'll go ahead and drop that into our scene. Let's take the creation node. Let's increase the radius a little bit, and let's also take the height up a bit. So here is our cylinder shape. Now for this shape, we are going to be smoothing this at the end. And so instead of just leaving this as a polygon, what you can do is use a smooth mesh preview. And in the past, you've converted objects to subdivision surfaces, or you've actually created a smooth where you've added polygons. But with this, you can just hit 3, and that gives you a sort of a smoothed version of your mesh. So it's taken the polygons, created a smoothing algorithm, and smoothed those down. If you hit 2, you can see the smoothed object and the cage. So right now it doesn't look very good. And so, but I just want you to be aware that we are going to be smoothing this, and we'll be checking it periodically because the way that you model this is going to be slightly different than if you're just building this to serve as a base polygon. So because we're going to be smoothing this, we don't necessarily need all of these divisions all the way around. Okay, if you're not going to be smoothing it, you want to have those divisions because it gives you a nice smooth curve and nice circular shape. But if we're going to be smoothing this, a lot of that's going to be taken care of, and so we can take our axis subdivisions down, and I usually like to take them down to maybe 12 or 8. You can get down lower than that to get a smooth shape if you want, but to get a nice round tight circle, I'm going to stay with 12 subdivisions along the axis. Now we want to have sort of a groove in the side here. Let's kind of forget about our primitive kind of parameters here. So let's go ahead and delete our history, and then we'll look at some ways that we can add the detail that we need without having that at our disposal. So we want to have sort of a large groove in the middle to be able to put the legs into. And so we need to add resolution here. So we need edge loops. Okay, we don't have anything from here to here to be able to add any sort of detail in the middle. So in order to add edge loops, there's different ways of going about this. And a loop just means that we can take it from one side all the way around the other. And you can see if we continue across each one of these quads, it'll eventually end up in the same spot. So in those cases, you can create complete loops. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the Insert Edge Loop tool under Edit Mesh. We open up the options. You can see it's currently set to relative distance from edge. This just means instead of having this multiple edges selected, we can move this around, okay, wherever we want it. Now, there's an insert with edge flow, which is nice if you've got a complex curve. We don't really have that, so we'll leave everything at default. So now what we can do is click on one of these perpendicular edges and drag it up and down to wherever we want it. Okay, so in this case, we'll figure out how wide do we want the groove, and we'll put this on the top edge of the groove, and then we'll add one at the bottom. You can see we're still in the tool. We can add one at the bottom for the bottom edge of the groove. Okay, so we've now defined the edges for that particular groove. Now, so we want this to be sort of raised, and we can do this in 2 different ways. We can either take these polygons and extrude them out, or we can take these polygons and extrude them in. It just depends on what you want. So if you need to maintain this shape or this size up at the top, then you can extrude these in. Otherwise, you can extrude them out. We'll just do this, extrude them in, because we haven't really done that before. So go to extrude. Let's go to thickness, and we'll take that thickness in a negative number. And you can see how that now pushes in and creates those new polygons. So we've created now that groove. Let's see what happens when we smooth it now. So we'll just hit 3 on the keyboard. Starting to look a little bit better, but you can see it's really, really doughy. We don't get that hard surface look. It's very, very smooth. That's just because we don't have a lot of resolution in here because it's smoothing between the points. So you can see right here, it's smoothing between this point, which is all the way at the center. It's not hitting another point till it gets to here and then here. And so smoothing between those three gives you a very smooth transition. So the idea is that in order to create the hard surface look, in order to create the kind of beveled edges that we've been adding before, you add geometry in those places where you want to tighten it up. So for instance, here you can see that's really just kind of disappears. And so in order to get this change of direction here, we need to add additional edge loops in here. Okay, there's also methods of creasing, but I really like adding the edge loops because it's really baked into the geometry. We don't have to worry about transferring that information. It's all right there. So let's go back into our Insert Edge Loop tool. And so remember what this looks like. So now we can come in and just add an edge loop here, and then on the other side, and then we'll do the same thing here at the bottom and the top. So we're just kind of enclosing those corners. Now let's see what this corner looks like. Now we get a kind of a bevel there. You can see where it's not a completely sharp edge. And so that's kind of the same effect that we're getting when we were creating those bevels earlier. Now you can see the top is still smooth. And you can kind of compare. This is what the top edges look like versus the bottom. So you can kind of decide how sharp you want those to be. If you don't want them to be that sharp, then all you have to do is just make sure that your edges aren't quite so close. So the farther your edges go away, the smoother your smooth model will be. The closer you get them, kind of the softer it'll be. So you could kind of vary that up a little bit if you wanted to. And you can see how that edge is a little bit softer. And then the bottom is again curved sort of down. Okay. We can also come in and begin to add a little bit of shape to this. So maybe this is the bottom. We can sort of taper it by just kind of scaling this down a little bit. And just have a little fun creating some detail here. So we'll go ahead and let's just use extrude a few times. So we could offset this a little bit, hit G to repeat that, and kind of pull this down a little bit. Maybe we can kind of scale this in a little bit, hit G again to do another little offset. Okay, and then you can smooth that, kind of see what it looks like. Gives you a little bit of kind of smoother detail, so maybe that's cool. You can kind of add a little bit of detail down here. If you want to create more of a larger bevel, you could take this edge loop. I've just double clicked on it. We could do a bevel on it to create that, and then come in and maybe take our offset down a little bit. And then, when you smooth it, it's going to smooth out. But if you don't want that to happen, we can add edge loops. Now, another way to do that beyond using our Insert Edge Loop tool is use the Offset Edge Loop tool. And what that'll do is allow you to create edges on either side of an existing edge. So instead of clicking on the perpendicular edge, I'll click on the parallel edge and then drag to kind of bring those edges together. You can do the same thing down here. Kind of drag to bring and it just adds edges on both sides. So now when we smooth this, you can see we get a cool little kind of sharp bevel in the midst of our softer edge down here. And it's nice because you can just kind of change things up a little bit and create a nice hard surface piece here. Up here we can sort of do the same thing. This is where it's going to be sort of connected up, and so I want to have maybe an opening or kind of a gap in here, so I can select this. Let's go to extrude. Let's do an offset. Okay, and let's repeat that, and this time we'll kind of push this down. And if you want to, you can come in and add a little bit of interest here by just kind of scaling it in a bit. And then let's get our Offset Edge Loop tool. We can come in and begin to add some edges here, maybe right in here. And so you sort of begin to add that opening. Now, if you want to make sure that you have that opening, and you want to be able to make almost like a hole here, you can select those, and we'll just kind of extrude that, and let's just push it straight down. So something like that. And again, if you want to tighten up that edge, you can go ahead and use either the Insert Edge Loop tool or the Offset. loop tool. And again, just hitting 3, you get something like that. So you get the nice smooth curve going around the circle, and then you can alternate between softer edges and harder edges based on how close you put those edges in. And the insert edge loop tool and the offset edge loop tool are great tools for adding that sort of geometry to keep those hard surfaces, or those hard edges rather. All right, so once we've got our cylindrical sort of base here, kind of a hard surface piece, the next thing we'll do is build our bracket to hold all the solar array panels and connect them all into the top of this base. So let's go ahead and do that next.